Today on Jurassic Architect, we are going to be talking about gardening. Hello and welcome back to Tricolor Gaming with me, Fletcher, and welcome to another Jurassic Architect video. It used to be that to make great looking gardens and planted areas, that you needed Kyodenic's legendary mods. However, with the most recent update, everyone can now create brilliant planted areas in the base game. Let's go through some simple tips. Number 1, take note of what sorts of foliage that we now actually have to use. I like to separate them into 4 types: bushy trees, thin trees, short trees, and flowers and bushes. It is also worth noting that we now have colourful trees in the form of those autumn orange trees from the Philadelphia map, and these can add some much needed colour to your usually very harshly green areas. Tip number 2, when creating planted areas, always try to place a particular colour under them all to maintain the design through the park and to also help you figure out where you want them. This works best if you select a terrain texture that makes sense for the map. For example, on tropical maps use the dark mud brown texture, while for desert maps use the bright sand. Maintain this through the park. Tip number 3, remember that sometimes less can be more. Filling every single area of space with foliage might sound tempting, but it'll also make your park look cramped and overly full. It will also contribute to your FPS. Remember that everything you put down requires your GPU to render. You may have a super powerful system where this is less of an issue, but if you have a more mid-range or low-end system, consider that placing down too much can become a problem. Now, with those basic tips, let's do some examples, and if these tips and the following gameplay helps, don't forget to give us a like and subscribe for more content from all of us at Tricolor Gaming. So when it comes to planting, there's 3 things I like to do: linings, gardens, and gap fill. Let's take a look at lining first. Here we have a simple park area, the sort of thing you might create at the start of one of your parks. 2 simple enclosures, amenities, a little decoration. You can already see here that I've marked out all the areas for planting in brown. So lining. This is the name I've given to using foliage to create linings around certain areas. For example, around the main enclosures, we can place plants to hide those ugly fence lines and to line the edges of our paths. We can also use it between the paths to create a nice bushy centerpiece. Now for doing lining, I suggest that you use something that is quite bushy and full coverage. The Taiga medium tree 2 and 3 works best here, along with any of the medium and large temperate trees. Remember that for your best and natural look, try to vary the rotation and type of plant being used, unless you want something that looks like a deliberately planted hedgerow. So here we have all the lining in place. You can see I have used bushes to create hedgerows, and the bushy trees to create an effective tree line avenue going up the middle. The addition of the red and orange trees really breaks up that monotonous green. Now then, let's take a look at gardens. There are 4 areas in this park I want to use for preset gardens. Now I go through the same process with any garden that I want to build in the park. The first thing is to place down my hardscape. This includes objects like rocks, but it could also include various other forms of decorations such as statues, obelisks, and fountains. Place these objects down to create your hardscape and to give you something to plant your foliage around. The next step is to place down your tallest trees and foliage. To help lay them out, place them around the edges of your hardscape as if deliberately planted there. Also remember that really big trees would naturally need a lot of water and a lot of space, so try not to place too many and try not to place them too close to one another. For smaller garden areas, stick to shorter trees. With the biggest plants planted, now comes the layering. Place down shorter vegetation around the bigger items and objects until you reach the smallest vegetation types. Remember that you don't have to fill the entire space to make it look like a decent garden area. I try to ensure that the bottom of all of my hardscape is covered by at least some plants. As you can see here, I've created 2 small gardens in the middle of the seating areas, while the larger gardens are formed from larger trees and rocks, as well as several statues. The final part of foliage planting is for gap fill. I have several areas in this little park that are ripe for gap filling. Gaps will naturally occur in your parks, even if you're using mods that remove collision. For example, here around my pillars and wall decorations, there is some ugly brown dirt that is just calling out for some foliage. There are no rules I use for gap filling, but in general I try to make it look natural and neat. For example, by these flaming pillars I won't have any tall plants that might catch fire. However, by these towers I can be a little more free. Remember to vary what you're using and vary the rotation and the placement. So with that all done, let's check out the before and let's look at the after. It makes quite a difference to the overall look of the park when you take some time to sort out your foliage. Here's some more examples of things you can do with it. How about creating a hedge maze using the bushes and thin paths? Create a simple pattern inside and fill the rest of the area. Remember to add something nice to the centre of the maze for folks to find. Or this palatial style garden section with neat hedgerows, planted trees, and 2 small Zen garden areas. Or how about breaking up large path-filled areas with small gardens and focal points? A few rocks and a few plants helps to remove some of that harsh path colour. Or this, using various bushy plants to cover up the position of a lagoon and make it look far more natural and bedded in. I found that the temperate trees work best for this. And remember, if you use mods, especially free build, then you can really make some interesting use of your foliage. Personalize those fountains for your specific biome, whether it's a desert, temperate or alpine park. Create modern art looking sculptures using the DNA fountain. Or you can just plant some flowers in the water and rocks to make it look more interesting. You can do the same with the smaller fountains to make them look more alive. And of course you can do the same with the standard planter and rock border pieces. Add small trees and flowers to them to make them look more unique and special for your parks. Or finally, how about making those lagoon decorations even more interesting with some added foliage and colour? With free build there really is a large amount that you can do with the new trees. It really does make the park pop out when you take some time to make your foliage and plants look as good as they can be. And remember that these same rules can be applied to inside your enclosures too, if you want to take a little extra time manually placing down trees. But whatever you do, remember those 3 tips from the start of the video. 1. Look at the types of foliage you have to use and use them where appropriate. 2. Use ground texture to help direct and lay out your foliage areas. And 3. Don't overload, less can be more. Now I hope this video has been informative, and if you want more tips and tricks like this, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. If you have anything that you'd like me to tackle in future episodes of Jurassic Architect, let me know down in the comments. Until next time, stay safe and happy gardening.